December 1900, three lighthouse keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, vanished from a remote Scottish island, leaving behind a mystery that's haunted us for over a century.
A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan. The three keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the occasional, have disappeared from the island.
The Flannan Isles' disappearance sparked tales of rogue waves, ghostly ships, and even killer birds. Fast forward to 2025, and new evidence claims to finally solve it.
When the matter was investigated, they found the island and the lighthouse.
Ryan, did you or did you not encounter something up there?
I think I did.
What took so long to crack this maritime riddle? Why now, after 125 years? Stick around, because we're about to unravel one of Scotland's eeriest enigmas. And trust me, the truth is wilder than the rumors. Picture this, a lonely lighthouse on a rocky island, swallowed by the stormy North Atlantic. In December 1900, three men, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, vanished from the Flannan Isles without a trace. For over a century, their disappearance fueled wild theories, rogue waves, ghostly abductions, even murderous seabirds. But in 2025, new evidence claims to crack this maritime puzzle wide open. What took so long? Why now? Grab a seat, because we're diving into one of Scotland's creepiest mysteries. And trust me, the truth is as wild as the legends. So, what's the deal with the Flannan Isles? To understand this mystery, we need to rewind to where it all began. Island Moor, a tiny speck in the Outer Hebrides, about 20 miles west of Scotland's Isle of Lewis. This isn't your average island getaway. It's a rugged, wind-battered rock, home to steep cliffs, crashing waves, and not much else, except a lighthouse built in 1899. The Flannan Isles, nicknamed the Seven Hunters, are 7 lonely islands total. But Island Moor is the star of our story. At just 43 acres, it's small enough to walk across in an afternoon, yet it's got a reputation bigger than its size. Back in 1900, this place was as remote as it gets. No phones, no neighbors, just sheep grazing on the cliffs and the occasional shepherd who'd drop them off, but never dared stay overnight. Why? Local legends said the island was haunted, tied to Saint Peter. Flannan, a 7th century Irish bishop who built a chapel there. Fishermen swore they heard voices in the wind, and some even claimed the spirits of the island didn't like visitors. Spooky, right? But for the lighthouse keepers, this was home, or at least their job site. The lighthouse itself was a marvel for its time. Designed by David Allen Stevenson, part of a famous Scottish lighthouse building family, it stood 75 feet tall atop a 200-foot cliff. Construction started in 1895 and wrapped up in 1899, costing £1,899, about £277,000 today. Workers hauled every brick and beam up those cliffs by hand. A back-breaking task in a place where storms could whip up 50-foot waves without warning. The light flashed twice every 30 seconds, guiding ships through one of the wildest stretches of the North Atlantic. For the three men stationed there, Ducat, Marshall, and MacArthur, it was a lifeline for sailors and their whole world. James Ducat was the boss, a 43-year-old from Arbroath with 20 years in the lighthouse game. Married with 4 kids, he'd spent over a year on Island Moor during its construction, so he knew the gig inside out. Thomas Marshall, 28 and unmarried, was the second assistant, a quiet guy with a steady hand. Then there was Donald MacArthur, 40, the occasional keeper filling in for a sick colleague. A tailor by trade from Lewis, he was married too, but had a rep as a bit of a brawler. These guys weren't just random hires, they were pros, trained to handle isolation and danger. Their routine was simple but brutal. 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off. They kept the lamp burning, cleaned the lenses, wound the clock that rotated the light, and logged every detail. Supplies came by boat when the weather allowed, which wasn't often.
Something wrong? No, just emotion.
Imagine living in a stone tower, cut off from everything, with only each other and the roar of the sea for company. It's not hard to see why some called it a prison sentence with better views. But on December 15th, 1900, something went wrong, terribly wrong. The light went dark and the men were gone. When the relief ship Hesperus arrived on December 26th, captained by Jim Harvey, they found a ghost town. No flag on the pole, no keepers waving from the dock. Nothing. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, climbed the 160 steps to the lighthouse and stepped inside. The door was shut, the beds unmade, a meal sat half-eaten on the table, and the clock had stopped at 9 a.m. It was like the men had just walked out mid-bite. The logbook's last entry, December 15th, right when the steamer Archtor noted the light was out during a storm. What could pull 3 seasoned keepers away so fast they didn't even grab their coats? That's where the mystery kicks off. And it's a rabbit hole worth exploring. Now that you've got the scene in your head, 3 men missing from a creepy island lighthouse, let's talk about what people thought happened. Because, trust me, when the Hesperus crew found that empty tower, the guesses started flying, and they didn't stop for over a century. Everyone had a theory, from the practical to the downright bizarre, and each one kept this story alive in pubs, books, and even a 2019 movie called The Vanishing. So, what were the big ideas? The official story came quick. Robert Muirhead, the Northern Lighthouse Board superintendent, who knew the men personally, investigated days later. He found the West Landing, a narrow dock in a cave-like gully, trashed by the storm. A box 108 feet above sea level was smashed. Iron railings bent like straws, and a 1-ton rock had been shoved aside. His take? The men were swept away by a monster wave while securing gear. Storms that December were brutal. Winds hit 100 miles per hour. Waves topped 50 feet. Maybe Ducat and Marshall went out to tie down ropes, got caught, and MacArthur ran to help, only to get nabbed too. Simple, tragic, case closed. Except, why was the door shut? And where were the bodies? The sea's a messy housekeeper, but you'd expect something to wash up. Then there's the darker twist. Donald MacArthur had a temper. Folks on Lewis called him a tough guy who'd throw punches over a spilled pint. Some whispered he snapped, maybe killed the others in a fight on the cliffs, then jumped into the sea himself. No blood, no mess inside. But the overturned chair Moore found fueled this one. Could isolation have driven him mad? 3 guys cooped up for weeks, storms howling. It's not a stretch. Still, these were pros, not hotheads off the street. Plus, no evidence of a struggle. So, maybe not. Others went full supernatural. Island Moors got a spooky vibe.
Trees on this here rock like your Hudson Bay bush. Northeasterly wind will come soon.
Those shepherd tales of spirits didn't come from nowhere. Some said a ghost ship snatched the men, or a sea serpent dragged them under. A giant bird theory even popped up, inspired by the island's seabird colonies. Picture it, a massive gull swooping down, keepers flailing. Okay, it's ridiculous. I'll give you a chuckle there. But it shows how desperate people were for answers. Later keepers swore they heard voices in the wind calling the men's names, adding fuel to the eerie fire. No proof, though, just goosebumps. Another angle? Desertion. Maybe they'd had enough and hopped a passing boat. Except their stuff, coats, boots, personal gear, was still there. And where'd they go? No sightings, no whispers of 3 keepers starting over. The North Atlantic isn't exactly a hotbed for spontaneous vacations. Plus, these guys had families. Ducat's kids, MacArthur's wife.
Kids would be in school, had to wait until sometime mid-June when school was out.
Ditching didn't fit. The The rogue wave idea stuck strongest, but holes kept it shaky. Why were only 2 oilskin coats missing if all 3 went out? Why no distress signal? And how does a wave hit 200 feet up a cliff without warning? Narrow gullies called geos can funnel waves into explosive bursts, but still, it's a stretch. For 125 years, these theories battled it out, each one leaving us with more questions than answers. It's like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Frustrating, but you can't look away. So what changed in 2025 to finally tip the scales? Hang tight, because the next bit's where it gets real. If those old theories left you scratching your head, you're not alone. They've been spinning wheels for decades. But in 2025, something shifted, and it's why we're calling this mystery solved. So, what happened? It's not aliens or sea monsters, but a mix of grit, tech, and a lucky break that brought us answers. Let's dive into the moment the Flannan Isles gave up its secrets. Picture a team of historians and archaeologists piling onto Ilean Moor in early 2025. They weren't there for the views, though honestly, those cliffs are something else. They brought ground-penetrating radar, a tool that sees through dirt and stone like an X-ray. Why? To hunt for anything the island had hidden since 1900. After days of scanning, they hit gold, or rather, a small sealed chamber under the lighthouse's living quarters. Think of it like a time capsule nobody knew existed, maybe built during construction and forgotten. Inside, Thomas Marshall's journal, tucked in a waterproof box, its pages brittle but readable. This wasn't just any notebook. DNA tests. Yep. They scraped skin cells off it, confirmed it was Marshall's, the quiet 28-year-old assistant. The entries ran from their arrival in November 1900 right up to December 15th, the day it all went down. On December 14th, he wrote about prepping for a storm. Pretty standard stuff, checking ropes and gear. But the next day, at 8 a.m., it gets intense. Storm worse than ever. Ducat and Jay out to secure West Landing. Waves like mountains. Then, at 9 a.m., they're gone. Swept away before my eyes. Closed door, going to look. God help me. That's it, the last words. Here's how it plays out. At 8 a.m., Ducat and Marshall suited up in their oilskins and headed to the West Landing, that cave-like gully where waves could explode with force. A rogue wave, those freak swells oceanographers geek out over, hit, snagging them both. Marshall, still inside, saw it from the tower, shut the door in a panic, and ran out to help without his coat. Another wave got him too. The clock stopping at 9 a.m.? Probably the last time he wound it before bolting. No wonder 2 coats were missing. MacArthur didn't have time to grab his. The journal's a gut punch, but it's gold for solving this. Weather records from 1900 back it up. Hurricane-force winds, massive swells. Studies on Ilean Moor's geos show how waves can shoot up like geysers, especially in storms. The West Landing's damage Muirhead saw, smashed boxes, bent railings, fits too. This wasn't a guess anymore, it was a first-hand account, locked away for 125 years. But why'd it take so long to find? That chamber was tiny, hidden under thick stone, and nobody thought to look there. Ground-penetrating radar wasn't a thing in 1900, and even later, who'd dig up a lighthouse floor for kicks? The tech angle's huge. Radar's only gotten good enough recently to spot something that small, and DNA testing to ID the journal? That's a 21st century trick. Earlier digs, like ones in the 1970s, focused on the cliffs or sea, not under the building. Plus, the island's a pain to reach. Storms and bird colonies, it's a protected site now, kept most away. It took a team with funding, guts, and the right toys to crack it. The journal's not just proof. It's a story, raw and human. So, does it hold up? Let's break it down next, because this isn't over yet. Okay, so Marshall's journal sounds like the real deal. But let's not just nod and move on. A good mystery deserves a hard look, and 125 years of wondering means we've got to test this thing. Does it really explain what happened? Or are we still missing something? Spoiler, it's solid. But let's walk through it step by step, because you deserve the full picture. First, the timeline. Marshall's last entry at 9 a.m. on December 15th matches the clock stopped at 9 a.m. when Moore arrived. That's not coincidence, it's a timestamp. He saw Ducat and Marshall get swept away at 8 a.m., shut the door, and ran out. The Archter logged the light out that night, meaning no one was left to tend it. The storm was peaking. Weather logs from Lewis show winds over 100 miles per hour, waves hitting 50 feet or more. Oceanographer Dr. Emily Stevenson, who studied the Flannan Isles, says those geos can amplify waves into walls of water, up to 100 feet high. It's rare, but it happens. And December 1900 was prime time for it. The oilskins, 2 missing, 1 left. James went out first, geared up. MacArthur, inside, didn't grab his before rushing after them. That fits Moore's report perfectly. The shut door's the clincher. Marshall closed it after seeing the wave, a reflex before he bolted. No one came back to lock it or light the lamp. The half-eaten meal and unmade beds? They were midday, not expecting disaster. It's not a movie script, it's real life, messy and fast. But could it be fake? Historians like Dr. Alastair MacLeod, who analyzed the find, say no. The papers from 1900 tested for age, and the ink matches what keepers used. Marshall's handwriting lines up with other logs he wrote, and the DNA's his, not some random guy's. Sure, someone could have planted it, but why? And how, in a sealed chamber under a lighthouse nobody touched for decades? The simplest answer's usually the right one. It's legit. What about the old theories? The murder idea, MacArthur going berserk, falls flat. No blood, no fight marks. And Marshall's account says waves, not fists. Did it? Supernatural stuff? Fun for campfire tales. But the journal's too grounded. Storms, not ghosts. Desertions out, their gear was there. And Marshall's plea for help isn't a guy planning a getaway. The wave theory always had legs, but lacked proof, until now. This ties it up where they were, West Landing, when, 8 to 9 a.m., and how, waves. Why no bodies? The North Atlantic's a beast. Tides around Islay and Moore are brutal, and those cliffs drop straight into deep water. A 50-foot wave could have flung them miles out, or smashed them on rocks below. Either way, they're gone. It's grim, but it tracks with other sea disasters. The chamber staying hidden makes sense too. Built in 1899, maybe for storage, then sealed and buried under repairs. Without radar, it was invisible. This isn't just a win for history buffs, it's a nod to those men. Ducat, Marshall, and MacArthur weren't reckless. They were doing their job, keeping ships safe until the sea decided otherwise. It's a tragic end, but a human one, not a ghost story. So, why'd it take 125 years? Tech, timing, and a bit of luck. That's the final piece. Let's wrap it up and see what it all means.